Hey, Allie,
What's up?
I wanted to talk to you about a couple of things today for this podcast, because this podcast is a little special. What do you say?
It's the special edition.
Special edition, episode number
7?
seven? Episode number 7?
Yeah. Let's just say
Season
7.
3?
So today we're going to talk for about 20 minutes, you and I, like we always do. And then we're going to talk to someone who has been on our team for a long time, kind of since the start of the
5
Wonder
years.
Jam.
Before.
Yeah.
He predates the Wonder Jam.
Predates. BTWJ, like before.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Like BC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk to him, and it has to do with what we're going to talk about now, which, I mean, you're interviewing me. I don't know. What are we talking about?
What are we talking about? So today I wanted to ask you a couple of questions, because so many people who we work with or who come to workshops or who listen to this podcast ask us about, or you can tell they feel like they need to either specialize in something to become like super, they only just do one thing, or they need to do everything.
Right.
So you see a lot of one person businesses like ours that pop up that do similar things to ours, and they call themselves a full service agency, meaning like we do everything that you could need, but we're one person, which is doable. A person could do that. Or you find other people who are like, I just focus on illustration or just focus on, you know, I have a person right now I'm working with who's like, can I teach yoga and be a health coach? I'm like, yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Or can I do, you know, there's this thing, it seems like, I don't know if it's because of school or how we grew up, that it just felt like you're supposed to like have one job and that job is your thing.
Right.
And now people are like, oh, can I do this? And I also kind of like doing this other thing. How do I balance all of that? So I'd be curious to hear your experience. We'll just talk a little bit about, to start, how you maybe think about your job. Do you feel like you're a specialist in something, or how do you say focused, or how do you kind of do a lot of things?
That's a good question. I think that I am not a specialist. When I think of specializing in like photography and design, I feel like it's, like you said, hand lettering, illustration, even a style of illustration, strictly doing food photography, strictly taking, you know, candids or, you know, lifestyle images. And I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is I have done all of that. I just chose not to continue on doing it. So I see a lot of people like hitting that fork in the road before they've even tried anything. And the biggest thing that I think, the biggest mistake that they're making is that they haven't just tried it. Like me trying a new genre of photography doesn't make that my brand. It doesn't make that like, you can kind of backtrack. People aren't always aware of what you're doing.
Right.
And so I have shot family photos, weddings, you know, product photography, food photography, all of it.
Yeah.
And then I decide from there, like, what am I going to like keep going? And what am I going to discard?
But then I would even say you aren't even a photographer. Like, you're not even just a photographer.
Right, for sure. And that's, again, like can I pick this up and use it in the context that I feel like is best for the kind of people that I want to help, or the type of job that I want.
Yeah.
But within the different types of things I do, you can even get so much more specialized.
Yeah. And I think in season 1 of this podcast, we had our friend Danielle on, and she just does food lettering. Yeah. You know, makes words with food and is locked into whatever, didn't even believe that that's a thing that exists. Right. So specialized, so focused. Very. That she has a process that she uses to go through those things. It's evolved as her skills have evolved. And there's a certain type of person that it works for. Yeah. Where I see other people saying, well, I can be a designer, or I can just be an illustration, or I'm just going to be in photography, or even stepping back a little bit and saying, I'm just going to be in, like, truth. You've done a bunch of copywriting for people. Yeah, you're not going to put that on your resume, probably. Right. Why would you have a resume? Are you trying to get another job? I don't know. I haven't had one in a long time. I don't have one right now. Right. Oh, I got to go find my old resume. We should. The last one we ever had. Yeah. But yeah, I think all of that is,
like, don't get so far ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
Like, don't be afraid to try something. Don't think that makes you so focused.
And I think it's I battle this a little bit with having the coffee business project, where you and I are always in this conversation of, does this need to be another brand? How do these like two brands serve each other? How are they separate?
Yeah.
How do they influence and inform how people think about us? And so there's a number of times where I've thought in my head, oh, I should like spin off another brand that does this other thing.
Yep.
And you'll say, no, we can just we do that.
Right.
The Wonder Jam can just do that, and it's not a big deal. It's so fascinating to me. I just think with coaching clients, people they feel like they have to be either everything or just one thing, and they don't realize, you can pick 3 things and be defined that way.
I know this sounds so, I don't know, negative, but nobody cares that much.
Right.
Like, nobody's sitting at home being like, Adam does coffee and he does coaching. Like, I don't know how to grapple with this.
Why do I even talk to him?
Yeah, like
Who is he?
Nobody thinks about that. I do think there is a lot of power behind talking about one thing that you do all the time.
Yeah.
Like when I did painting 2 summers ago, I was like only sharing about painting, and that changes people's perspective.
And so talk about how that.
So while I wasn't focused in my career, it wasn't like I, decided like, okay, now
you didn't stop doing photography. You didn't stop doing design. You were still doing all of the things that you always do. But
I would
you were
say
only
like
sharing.
Yeah, like 1/10 of my time was being taken up by painting, but I was sharing only 100% of that. So if you're trying to change like your niche or niche, I think we learned that it was niche, right?
Oh man, I forget. No, everyone voted. No, I looked it up. Everyone voted niche.
Oh, but it's niche?
I think so.
No, I think whatever. If you know this answer and you're listening, you're
pretty sure
like yelling at the podcast.
I'm pretty sure it's niche.
Okay. Well, I guess I just mean like you can like change that perspective.
Yeah.
Like you can establish a more dominant focus for yourself as a brand, and it might not be the best thing for you to do.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I just don't think that's such a good point, is that your customers, clients, audience isn't sitting at home sort of grappling with your identity. No. You are.
Yeah.
And you're the one who's like, oh, I don't want everyone to think of me as... And you and I have found that sometimes we could easily be positioned as a spouse to the other one, or the other person's assistant, which doesn't put us in a good light, even though...
We assist each other.
Yeah, you were like carrying luggage out of a hotel. We did a conference at today. I was helping to rotate a screen so you could explain what was going on.
Yeah, we all like change but it's just like, what do you amplify to the public?
Truth.
So I think a lot of that, all of that goes into it, and thinking through what are you putting out there and sharing with the world, and you can be a lot more varied.
Tell a little bit of the behind the scenes secrets for you of how you have managed to shift your own brand, knowing that you have, I'm going to say you'd have a lot of stuff going on. You do a lot of different things, but it also is kind of like in the same zip code. It's not like, you're not also like, oh, I'm also becoming an actress, or I'm not also,
I have
doing
something to tell you though.
What?
I am becoming an actress.
Promise?
No. I actually wonder almost every month if I would be a good actress, and I wouldn't.
We were just shout out to Midwest Craft Con. We were just there, and one of the people teaching a Facebook ads class also is working on becoming an actress and was just in like a big time commercial.
Amazing. So she's probably like really good at teaching.
Yeah.
You would assume.
And she has her own business, like her own product line too. So she's very
That's cool.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah, I'm not that varied, but sorry, what were you asking?
Like how do you keep it sticky? So let's say I'm imagining how do you keep it sticky? That's it.
You just pour honey all over it.
How do you, let's say you're a person who's listening to this podcast and you are just known for doing that one thing and people don't know about the other things that you're doing. Or maybe you're a person here or a person listening who's like, I kind of do a bunch of different stuff, but I want to start just getting known for this like one style, this one, like I want to start to like focus down on what we're doing. How would you tell somebody to go through, or how have you seen in the past, like getting stuck in people's heads?
Oh, got it. I think you have to become more interesting than the thing that you're doing. Not become more interesting, but you have to elevate that you have somewhat of a multidimensional personality, which hopefully you do.
How have you done that?
I blogged for almost, I think, 7 years
10?
Straight. No, 2009 to 2016. Stopped, I'm starting to pick it back up, but I was sharing a lot of the different things that interested me, from makeup to food to simplifying my life to design work to productivity. And I was talking about a lot of different things that I think people connect with beyond just a physical or digital thing that I provide. And so, that's a long time of just sharing a lot. And it wasn't until I turned 29 or 30 where I was like, it feels kind of weird to share so much of my life. But I think in that stage of my life, it was really natural. Yeah. And I took advantage of it. Now that's transitioned into social media or, teaching workshops. Even today when we were at Midwest Craft Con, someone was like, I followed your photography challenge last year. And it was cool that that's a thing that she wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And someone else might connect with someone else on a different level, or something else would have been more sticky. And so cool. I see all of those things as just opportunities to talk about other things. If you're a creative person, or you write, or you provide some sort of service, or you're like a health coach, you want the people to hire you. You want the people that hire you to like you. So for me, it wasn't even about, I don't even share my work on my personal Instagram or my blog anymore.
Right.
I'm just being a person and occasionally mentioning that I have a business.
Yeah. In the context of your life, which is you spend a decent amount of time on the business that you're in. Right.
And so I would say I could probably even do a better job of helping people understand the variety in which we do here at the Wonder Jam, or the things that I can do. I just don't have the urgency to yet. It's not like we're desperate for work. And so everybody's situation's different. Yeah. There was a time where I was blogging a lot about my work and my photography.
No, that's really cool. Do you find, so I want to sort of summarize that for someone listening. If you feel like you're known for a lot of different things and you want to start becoming better known for one, you need to start choosing what you don't tell people and say, okay, so this is true. I'm not going to post about this all the time. I don't need to share this all the time.
Right.
Or if you're on the flip side and everybody knows you as one thing and you would like to sort of start to be known, understood as more, you got to think through that mix. How are you sharing with people? How are people finding out about you?
Yeah, you can't just stay in your house and hope that people know those things. Right. It does take sharing, and it's vulnerability. It's not vulnerability to share with the masses, but it's vulnerable to open yourself up to criticism, or not getting that instant gratification from likes and comments or whatever. But it does make me think, before we start talking with Matt in the next segment, I get a lot of people who talk to me after workshops that we put on about, I want to work for a small business, but they're not hiring. I don't know what they're hiring. Are they hiring just a designer? Do I have to be really specialized? Or I kind of want to work part-time. And I think if more people were willing to talk at a higher level about why they do the things that they do. If you're someone who can take great photos and design pretty decently and use social media, there's a ton of small businesses out there that just need to understand how those talents compute into, this will help my business.
Yeah. There's such a, oh my gosh. Because I think so many people wish or would like to have a client roster that looks similar to ours. And they're like, how do I start helping these businesses that aren't necessarily wired to be helping? And they're not posting jobs somewhere, and they're not.
Or if you're looking to get hired part-time by a creative agency that's small, there's a lot of businesses out there that will hire, they would hire you part-time. I just get a lot of those people who aren't necessarily looking for that 9-to-5, great benefits, corporate salary.
Oh, truth. Yeah,
they're looking to get in, they're a generalist in that they're good at a lot. How do you catch a small business's eye over someone I've been a designer for 9 years.
Yeah.
And I think that varied skill set is helpful in certain situations.
Yeah, so strong.
You just can't think beyond talking about titles and think about how that can help that business. How does what you do help them?
We've had a couple of people reach out to us about working with here, which we're not hiring, so don't worry about doing that. But one of the things I always ask them to do, because they'll usually give themselves like a title. They're like, oh, I'm a this. Yeah. I'm like, can you just write a list of I would be willing to do, or I would be good at doing this
all these tasks.
If I got paid. And then how would you like to be paid? Like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to have like a certain amount every month or an hour or whatever your thing is? And most of the time people are like, I don't know. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you to do then. Yeah. I would say I often take that list and I'll send it to my friends and be like, this seems like a person who looks like you could use this type of help. Would you like to talk to that person, or would you like to, connect with them?
For sure.
And it's so useful, and it's not a resume. It's just a list of what can you do and how can you help out.
And that's the difference between, like, we don't have titles here. I mean, you have to kind of summarize what you do in order to talk to, like, the basic
If you're sending an email to Nationwide Insurance and being like, oh, hey, I kind of have, like, a bunch of different interests, and I would like to explore all of those at your company. Yeah. They're like, we have this job description that's, like, reports to these people and does exactly these tasks.
Exactly.
And if you fall over, we'll replace you with somebody doing the exact same thing. Yeah. And small companies don't typically operate that way. No.
And so that's why in this next segment, we're going to talk to Matt. Matt has worked with us for the entirety of the Wonder Jam.
Yeah. You two collaborated a bit before on a project.
We collaborated as freelancers, and then so we got an introductory way to work together. And we like talking, like, this conversation's interesting because Matt doesn't require full-time work. Yeah. He still gets all the things done that we need, and he's able to still do a lot of the other stuff.
There's sometimes it surprises me how much Matt's not a full-time part of the team because his presence is very much a part of
and committed
in our projects and the way so it's not like he's like, oh, he's like gone most of the time. Yeah. I think the other thing, and we kind of talk a little bit about this as we get started in his portion of the episode, is I'm always inspired and like a bit admire the way he stays involved in his friendships and relationships and supporting his buddies and traveling. And he came to visit us and he was like, oh, I have a book club. And I was like, oh, well, tell me about that. And he was explaining all of it. I'm like, oh, he keeps space for his interests. Yeah. You and I can sometimes, we miss out on that in our life sometimes. Yeah. And I think it was cool to get to hear. We both have observed that in him, and it was cool to get to hear him talk more about that. I think it's something that's one of his probably unique strengths and kind of what he brings to the table. We can get a little laser. Like focused. We didn't talk about this when he was his episode, but he was here. He's not here anymore, so we can talk about him, right?
He lives in Seattle.
But he was visiting us, and when we recorded this episode, and there's a day we had planned to all make dinner together. Like, he had a whole thing that he loved and we all wanted to make it together. And that ended up being a longer work day for us. And it's exactly the type of day that that you and I would go home and be like, we're not doing that thing, right? We're like ordering some food. And it ended up him being like, oh no, we're like still going to do it.
Yeah, it's good.
And so I've appreciated and I do appreciate his commitment to like holding those things to be important, because it's so easy, especially when we're living in business owner land. It's easy to always feel like we have some pressing thing that we have to do and to give up. Like, if you sit around a big table of business owners and you're like, oh, I'm going to like cancel this friend thing or family thing because of work, like that gets celebrated. Right. And it's cool.
Or we're like, oh, I totally get it.
Yeah. It's cool to be around somebody who kind of centers you back to the other parts of life that are important. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. So I think this conversation's interesting. I hope you all enjoy it. I know we're breaking our interview rule of no interviews, but too bad. We make the rules. Enjoy.
Peace.
Matt, welcome to our podcast.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
You're not a stranger. We didn't just invite you off the street like most people on our podcast.
True.
How did you come?
Am I?
Why
we
are
also
you
have
here?
no guests. So the better question is, why is there a guest in this season of the podcast?
Well, the answer to that question is that my name is Matt, and I am the developer for the Wonder Jam, and I usually live in Seattle, but right now I am here in Columbus, Ohio.
We have to make exceptions.
Yes, so I'm the exception that proves the rule about guests on this season of the podcast.
He's not really a guest. He's just like, he's been here.
I would say too, you know, when you go to like a family member's house or like your significant other's parents' house or something, and they're like, you're not really a guest anymore. You can just get your own water.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it is, right?
Yeah, I try to get my own water.
Yeah. I don't ever get your water for you.
Correct.
But we wanted to talk about something that we think is interesting. And really, at the end of the day, we're just trying to come up with things that we think people would like to listen to.
This season has been really cool because we get a lot of feedback, questions, or like follow-up conversation from the people who are listening to this on social media. And they tell us either like the last episode we did was about personality tests.
Yes.
And so a lot of folks responded and told us what their personalities were, or they took tests, or they're like, this is also a good test to take.
Correct.
And so that it's become like very much a dialogue, and this is kind of our part. And one of the things we noticed, so we've worked with Matt for 3 years, 4 years, 2?
I think about 5 years.
Yeah.
5?
I think so too, because it was when I was
It has to be.
freelancing.
Was it really?
Well, it wasn't the Wonder Jam yet. There was still like maybe a little break. But
It was definitely before 2014 because I remember the apartment.
yeah. I remember our apartment. Because
I remember an apartment too. Just trying to fit in.
So a long time. And
one of the things that we've noticed about Matt as we've worked with him over time is he has a lot of different interests and a lot of different things that he is working on, and he cares about all of them. So some people are like, oh, I have this side gig that I do to make money, but then I have this other thing that I actually really care about, or they just care about their professional life and not necessarily their personal life, or they only care about their personal life. They don't really care how they make money. And Matt seems to be a person who, it's not like he has 12 other businesses, but he has other things that he invests his time into, which we thought was cool.
And as we talked to you, Matt, about this episode, we also talked about those specific and intentional decisions you made to find what works for you, that might to other people feel like non-obvious solutions or paths that you could take. So I think the first thing, and to give it context, would be talk about what you were doing before we were collaborating together, and then that sort of process. Like, how did you come to work with us in the least boring version of that story?
Great. So I have been doing freelance website stuff since 2010. I got into that from literally someone of the generation above me, of my parents' generation, saying, you're good at computers, you should do this. There's this thing called WordPress. You should learn how to do it because people like me need younger people like you who can help us through this stuff.
Yeah.
And they were right. And I was very fortunate that all the pieces of software and things that I committed to learning to ended up paying off and ended up being things that became popular.
Yeah.
So at the time, I was living in Chicago, and I have always played in bands. So the band that I've been playing in since we've known each other is called The Local Strangers. We're based out of Seattle. I play guitar and sing and am the co-front person and band leader of that project. So as I was developing freelancing, obviously wanting to do music and wanting to commit a lot of time to music, freelancing was super appealing. Being able to set my own schedule, being able to work a lot and then go on tour and not work, and then just work a lot when I got back.
Yeah.
Things like that. That structure appealed to all the different things that I wanted to do. For the first few years of that web business, I really prided myself on being a one-stop shop. Wanted to be able to do everything pretty well.
Yeah.
So someone would come to me and they need a logo and they need branding and they need a website design and they need a website and they need to know how to use their website and they need to like have someone to help them if things go wrong. And I was like, yeah, I can do all of that. And I was able to start my pricing low while I learned and then raise my pricing as I went. As time went on, every once in a while, I wouldn't be in that kind of I'm doing everything role. I would be connected with a designer. I did that a couple times before the first time that Allie and I did that together, where someone else was designing the site and I was just coding it and building it. And those were always kind of like fun change of pace projects. I got to focus really specifically on problem solving in a business standpoint. I didn't have to stress out about whether the client liked the creative things that I did for them. I already had a lot of stress in my life about whether people liked the creative things that my band was doing. So taking that pressure off sometimes was really nice.
Yeah.
But then a shift happened where I started to realize that a lot of the things that I was doing, I was still doing pretty well, but my heart wasn't in them anymore. I didn't like doing that anymore. And around the same time, an opportunity with the Wonder Jam forming came up where you guys came to me and said, after we had kind of traded work back and forth a few times, and said, hey, we're joining forces and we're doing this thing, and we want to have a consistent person to build the sites for our clients who need websites. And that was kind of, a crossroads where I had to be really honest with myself about not only what skills I had, but what skills I enjoyed using. And let go of the ones that weren't paying off for me emotionally.
When you say, I forget the exact way you said it just now, but when you said like, oh, your heart wasn't in certain aspects of it, what does that look like for you?
For me, that looks like, the best example is, I did a homepage mock-up for a client. This is right around the time that I was making this transition. And I sent it to them and I realized, I don't care if they like it.
Yeah.
Whereas just, I wasn't super proud of it.
Yeah.
And I didn't really care.
Yeah.
And that was not a position that I ever want to be in with anything that I'm putting my time into.
Where you're just like, I don't care at all.
Yeah. Like I cannot function in a autonomous,
like how do I pitch this design when I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. And some people can do that. Some people can just be like, this is my job. I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to do the things that I care about. And that's not something that doesn't work for me for any kind of long-term thing. And then I realized also that like, I was just as proud of a site when it was finished and launched that someone else designed that I was with the ones I designed.
Did that surprise you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because when I first started, it was like the design elements are just like, being decent at Photoshop
cared.
Like having an eye. That's what I felt like I was better at when I first started, because I was just learning CSS and I was just learning WordPress and these tools. So I was like, well, like my like decent design eye and my ability to communicate with people is like the value that I'm really bringing here while I figure everything else out.
Right.
And then a few years later, I was just like, that part doesn't matter to me anymore.
Yeah.
And so being able to like, and that kind of connects to identity. And I think a lot of the stuff that we end up talking about today is fundamentally going to be about identity and being comfortable with when it shifts in you and not being resistant to it.
And it doesn't happen instantly after you're like done learning or going through education or after a job.
Exactly.
Which I think is something that now in our 30s, you're like, that took a while to like be comfortable in.
And it's still just such a moving target.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to passion projects.
Right. And for me, I think, and we've talked about it on the podcast before, but the going through any type of like trauma or grief or anything can completely flip whatever you thought you had figured out on its head. And you're just like, I actually don't value this part of what I do every day, even though I think it's important or I have pride in my work. Yeah. It's so much more complex than just, are you passionate or not?
Yeah. And there's an ego level to it in terms of like, I've always been good at this thing and I've always been praised for this thing. And like, that's made me feel good.
Yeah.
So many times, like and you realize that you're attached to the praise. You're not attached to the thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's super well. And I think even within our team, trying to give each other encouragement and talking about that with each other, I think also prevents you from really needing it from a client. And that, for me at least, was different when you're just freelancing on your own, because you don't have someone else on your team being like, this is so good.
Yeah. That was another thing in terms of becoming a team member and like us when we started working more and more together was it just dawned on me like, oh my gosh, I have coworkers again.
Right.
Like
someone
this
can
is
be like,
great.
thumbs up.
Yeah. Like I've just been like this guy on his couch for like a few years, you know, or like a desk sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to be able to be talking with the same people every day that aren't my clients, that aren't the people who are hiring me.
Yeah.
That just made my every day just like so much more enjoyable. Like,
right.
That was a huge difference.
And was it not always true? Like, do you think you're the type of person that could get that sort of like team encouragement? I like the sites that someone else designed. Do you think it takes a specific type of culture? Do you feel like anything would have helped fill that hole at the time? Or were you at that moment seeking a certain kind of opportunity, a certain kind of personality trait? And I only ask that in terms of people listening, if they're like, how do I look for that good fit?
Well, of course I wasn't looking.
Way? Right. It just fell into your lap.
It completely just fell into my lap.
Yeah.
And it just happened. I mean, it was a result of circumstances kind of brought us together, but it was a result of like the process of working together that was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that was the difference between when you guys, came and said, I think we'd have this many hours for you every month. And like, if we can be your priority, like we can work out an arrangement like that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just, oh, like that stability would be cool. It was like, oh, I like really like and respect these people. And I've really enjoyed the process of working with them.
It wasn't just financial.
Yeah. It wasn't just like a gig or like a job posting or a promotion.
Right. Or we weren't like, you have to be full-time and move here anything stronger probably at the time would have been like, even in a relationship, you're just like,
at the time we would have been like, we could maybe come to Seattle more if we if we pay him more, like we have good excuses to go to Seattle.
Yeah. But I do think that there's like that almost just like a personal relationship. I mean, everything is a personal relationship. You can, even in a professional way, kind of freak people out or come on too strong if your values don't align or if your like work ethic is different.
Absolutely.
I was always like that where
we've all been in part of relationships where people want to go real fast and be like, oh my gosh, you could be like my full-time VP of marketing.
Yeah.
Like, all right,
I don't want that.
What about like pay me $10?
Yeah. Right. And we were like those kind of values. Like, I feel like we work together enough, and like I saw that the way that y'all handled the process enough, and the way that you related to me in terms of the process, that those values I knew were aligned. And so that's what makes it exciting.
Right.
Like, it's not just like, oh, this is going to be a sweet gig for me.
Yeah.
It's like, there's something cool here, and I'm interested in being involved in that, and like being a piece in that, and over time figuring out like
what's next,
what that can look like.
For sure. It kind of gets into then Adam's conversation about like balancing things. Everyone who listens and all of us balance many things. We're not one dimensional. We don't just only have work. Talk a little bit about how you approach work-life balance, or how do you approach making time for your band? I know that there's a lot of things, and I'll probably interrupt with additional questions. But
Great.
Yeah.
So like on the balance question, I think I'd like to kind of make a disclaimer and like a little bit of a tangent to start that.
Tangent disclaimer.
Distangent.
Yes.
And for me, that's that my wife is the primary breadwinner in our household, significantly. And so, shout out, Allie. I love you. And so like, if I have a really unproductive day or like week or like, it never happens, but like if we had a tough month, if the Wonder Jam had a tough month, or just like stuff wasn't getting to the website process for me.
Yeah.
Like we're going to be okay. Like there isn't a desperation around that. And so I'm not using that as like an excuse, and it's not something that I don't think of myself as having like a safety net with that. It's just, I think that acknowledging that reality and that context is really important because it frames my psyche and my opinions about everything else and the advice that I would give.
And I bet a lot of people can relate to that. Like that's something that's very true of most homes.
Well, I think everybody has I met with a coaching client this week, and she was at a point where she had exited a previous business successfully and had a new thing that she was very aggressive with. And I was like, when does this need to pay you? And she was like, in 3 to 5 years. But she was going to invest a ton before then. And I was like, all right, that's a cool, like, that's just, you have to be very in touch with the reality of what keeps your lights on, you know? And
absolutely. And then like the other side, the like flip side of that is the like, especially like in the music world, you know, like there's so many people who are just like, man, I should just quit my job and then like just do music. And like, I'll make ends, the sheer force of being forced to make ends meet will like drive my career forward. Yeah. Because like, I'm just gonna be working on it all the time. And I think that that's kind of a trap. And that in reality that burns people out and that makes people miserable. And it's hard to translate that into long-term success. Because, well, for a lot of reasons that I think are like a little too deep to go into right now. But that's kind of the tangent part where it's just like, I think that that's kind of a trap on the other side of the like, but we all feel it. You know, it's just kind of like when you feel like you're not living up to what you think you can do, that you're not like operating at the capacity that I think you're capable of. Yeah. You're just like, man, like if I just like had to do it, like, but like, but like rent and deadlines are like not the same thing. Like deadlines are really helpful. Bills are really stressful.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and just, we talk about this, Adam and I, a lot, that a lot of people don't think it sounds glamorous, but that like slow journey to self-employment, first of all, self-employment means different things for everyone, like we're talking about, but neither of us woke up one day and we're like, we're just going to quit our job. We might not have had $30,000 in savings, no children, no house we own, but it was still a long process to get there. And we were freelancing on the side. I was working a part-time job. And so it doesn't always sound super sexy, but that's what it can look different for everyone.
Yeah. And you have to be honest about like what it would have to look like for you
to work. Yeah.
So like for musicians, like you're talking about like a lot of incredibly unglamorous gigs. You're talking 3-hour sets at a restaurant to make $250 and you're doing that 6 nights a week. That's not why people want to be musicians, you know? Yeah. So some people pull it off. I know some people will pull off in incredible circumstances, but you have to be honest with yourself about like
what goes into that.
Yeah, what that would actually look like and whether that lifestyle, whether you can survive, let alone thrive in that.
And for how long? Yeah.
Back to the question of how do you like figure out what you're interested in, or how do you prioritize your time, schedule, calendar, make things fit? What does it all? How does it all break down for you?
Yeah, or how have you found that you're different? What characteristics do you have that maybe helped form being intentional with those decisions? Like, hey, I don't have to have my hand in every part of the project. I'm willing to let that go. That's not going to work for everyone, but what are things about you that's helped with this? I want to be involved in a decent amount of things in my life.
It's tough. Like, I feel like there's a lot less intentionality than it seems like there is.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. Like there's being smart about a to-do list, and there's being like smart about a calendar, and like being good at communicating and things like that like there's set you up for success kind of.
Yeah. But it's within you already. You're not like trying on the jacket of communication. It's just like, I communicate well.
Yeah. Or just like if I can add just an ounce of intentionality to that, it's like something I'm already decent at when I bother to do it.
Yeah.
And it's the bothering to do it and understanding in the big picture how helpful that is. And I think that's that kind of like big, kind of seeing the big picture while also being focused on the very specific task in front of me.
Yeah.
I think that's a skill that has served me in all the different aspects of my life that I'm balancing that we're talking about. So like in a music standpoint, for example, that's like being able to lead a rehearsal and play my part right and be listening to what everyone else is going on and try to get a read on the energy level in the room. You know, it's like
at the same time.
Yeah, I'm trying to not only do the thing that I'm doing, but listen in individually to what each other person is doing and try to get a sense of the overall output and what it sounds like.
I also think something that's very literal that maybe someone who's listening might relate to if they're considering a freelance career or maybe they're in it right now. Something so small as if you want to take a vacation, I think there's like a level of, hey, I have a ton of flexibility in my career. You know, like I can choose when I go on tour. I can let Adam and Allie know, and we just won't need to build websites when I'm gone. But there also is a level of like, I also have to like greatly prepare for that trip and then also come back to a larger load, which is true of other jobs. Like, I think there's so many aspects of being a freelancer, owning your own business that's still very similar to people's 9-to-5s. You know, like there's a ton that's different, but that intent on communication and all the things that you just talked about, I remember having to deal with that when I worked for the state of Ohio, you know. I had to be like, how do I get myself to really care about this right now? This is a new day. I should finish this project ahead of time so that I can do this. It's not, as we were talking about it, I was just very aware that it's not so different.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, for me, it's it's like, when do I put an out of office up? I've like never used out of offices in the last 8 years or whatever. Because it was just like, everything's just kind of running through my personal email and I don't really know when I'm going to hear from stuff. And then the more that I was working with the Wonder Jam, it was like, all right, well, they know my schedule. Like,
no one should really,
they're not going to bother me.
Yeah.
But now, like in the last year, I've made more steps into taking more on my side of things and taking, some of the kind of management aspects of the website build part of the process on. And now it's like, I need to be good about out of offices.
Right.
Because like, I've got a Wonder Jam email address.
Right.
And people, I recoiled back to where, okay, I have these, now I like enjoy using some of those management and client management skills in ways that when we first started working together, that was one of those things I was kind of like reacting against, whereas like it was such a relief to not have to do that stuff at that point. And now a few more years in, now I'm like, it's okay. Like, and like, I can see how much the process overall benefits from me taking this on.
Yeah.
And it eliminates other things that were frustrating me. And so like, I can step up to the plate and do that. But like, now I need to like be good about making it out of office. I'm not good at that.
Right. Oh, I remember the first time we even started doing it. Do you remember? I don't remember the first time, Adam, but it was like, for me, owning a business, and this is kind of like my tangent, owning a business is like, you don't always want people to know you're out of office. Sure. Like if like a dream client comes through inquiry, you don't really want them to be like, I'm on vacation, bye. Like, I think that the way this gets even like deeper. We have it so that our inquiry emails, if you're interested in working with us, don't come directly to my email. So no one's going to get a bounce, like a out of office bounce back. But there's a level of like, you want out of office for like certain scenarios of your business. And then other times you want to be accessible or you want someone I'll take care of you, you know? It's like you want a very conditional out of office. At least I feel that
Definitely. way. Yeah. No, I wish you could do a little bit of like whitelist people. I wish I could set up I probably can. There's probably an app.
Well, it's like, it's definitely probably an app. In Gmail, it's either like email, give this to only the people like in your contacts or like within your sweet or something. I don't know. But yeah.
I was kind of surprised that you guys aren't already doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, we should probably do it.
You guys are so good at stuff like that.
No, I think this is a good conversation. I think it's like important to always think through why you're making the decisions that you're making in your career, whether or personal life or freelance life, small business life. And that was something I wanted to talk about because while you said a lot of it isn't this super planned out intentional choice, a lot of it was. And that's the thing that I can relate to the most is you saying, when my heart's not in it, I can't keep doing it.
Yeah.
And that's always been true of Adam and I.
Yeah.
If we're just like,
it's the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And be honest with yourself.
Heart.
Be honest with, and like be flexible around that. Like that will change over time.
Yeah.
And like your sense of yourself has to be grounded enough that like this thing that I really liked before, I don't like anymore.
Yeah.
This thing that I felt like, great example for music business, like a few years ago, like being good at the business side of my band and like being good at booking and being able to good at making X and Y happen, that like gave me such a rush. Yeah. And it was like, I was so proud of it. It felt like a core part of my identity. Like it wasn't just like, he's a talented singer. It was like, he self-manages that band really well.
Yeah.
And now it's like, that stuff just doesn't bring me any joy.
Yeah.
And so like, either I can resist against that and just kind of like, stand with my face into the wind and like try not to be pushed back.
Right.
Or I can reassess and say, okay, like that doesn't mean that I don't want to be a musician anymore. That just means like the things that are worth it about this for me, the things that I really love most about it are shifting.
Yeah.
And I need to kind of shift my parameters, shift my goalposts, shift my business model to accommodate for that so that I can be happy.
For sure. Awesome.
Truth.
I love Adam's like truths. Thanks for affirming it. Yeah.
Word.
Well, in the show notes, you can follow along with Matt's band online, and hopefully he'll be on the podcast again.